Niambi, are you in D.C. right now?
I am in D.C.
Welcome to our live Inauguration Day coverage. I'm Zincle Esamoah at NowThis. Kamala Harris was just sworn in as vice president, making history as the first woman, first Black American, and first person of South Asian descent elected. Joining me now is Dr. Niambi Carter, associate professor of political science at Howard University, where Vice President Kamala Harris went to undergrad. Carter is also the author of American While Black. She wrote in the Washington Post that Black voters in Georgia are to thank for Harris's influence. Thank you so much for being here with us.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, so to jump in, I know you're in D.C. right now, and I'm sure you've been watching everything that's been going on.
Yeah.
What is going through your mind? What's been going through your mind today?
Well, I think like most people, I was just praying for a calm day. I just wanted to go off without a hitch and no major snafus to happen after 2 weeks ago, which was really kind of chaotic and also very scary for many people who live in the district. I just wanted a quiet day, and it was a very quiet sort of conventional type of inauguration. So that's what we wanted.
Absolutely. And I think, of course, while there was the unconventional element of COVID with less crowds and increased military presence, it definitely has been calm thus far. You referenced this being in D.C. We know Howard University is in D.C. You were there when the Capitol riots were taking place, and I'm sure that that was an incredibly scary and traumatic event to go through. As a political scientist and someone who teaches at Howard, what do you believe fueled the uprisings that happened?
Well, listen, I don't think it was all Donald Trump's fault in the sense that this kind of racial politics has been floating around in the American ether really since the founding, if we want to be frank. But it was really Richard Nixon and the Southern strategy that made this popular politics. Ronald Reagan did it to great effect. What Donald Trump was able to do is tap into that vein of anger that really had been there for a long time and sort of started to come to the surface in the Obama years. And he rode that into office. And what he did that day was tell these people that America was being stolen from them, that these foreign entities, this sort of deep state people were there to take it away from them. And they acted on his words, which were go to the Capitol, right, and take it back by strength. So this was really people sort of being conditioned over a number of years to behaving and acting out in this way.
And thankfully, we've come a bit of a long way since the riot and are now at, as you mentioned, a more peaceful day, the inauguration. We know that Kamala graduated from Howard, HU. I see you representing the school today. And she studied political science and economics and also was a member of the Alpha Kappa Alpha sorority, the first Black sorority in the nation. So would also just love to hear from you. How is the collegiate community responding today?
Well, I think many of us who teach or work or who have attended HBCUs are extremely proud of not only what Kamala Harris has achieved, but also when you look over the broader swath of people who are acting politically right now. Senator Warnock, who's an HBCU graduate, Stacey Abrams, an HBCU graduate, Keisha Lance Bottoms, another HBCU graduate. They're really a testament to the rich intellectual environments of these kinds of universities that often go underappreciated. Many times people like to talk about where people got their law degrees or their graduate degrees and ignore the kind of efforts that HBCUs have really put into creating a class of Black professionals. Quite frankly, if you want Black engineers, you're going to go to HBCUs. If you want Black physicians, you're going to go to HBCUs. Lawyers, HBCUs. We are at the forefront of much of the educational innovation and advancement of Black communities and really other communities, because it's not all Black people that go to HBCUs. So HBCUs, I think, are getting their moment in the sun and getting their just due today.
It's definitely been powerful to see HBCUs come to the limelight a lot more and for the public more broadly to understand what they're all about. I know that Kamala gave a commencement address at Howard in 2017 where she talked about the need for getting beyond division in our country. I want us to take a look at what she had to say.
Indeed, we have a fight ahead. And it's not a fight between Democrats and Republicans. It's not rich versus poor or urban versus rural. This is a fight to define what kind of country we are. And it's a fight to determine what kind of country we will be. And it's a fight to determine whether we are willing to stand up for our deepest values. Because let's be clear, we are better than this.
And in that speech, we heard Kamala talk about defining what kind of country we are and the kind of country we will be. How do you think Vice President Harris now seeks to define the United States, and how do you think she wants her legacy to look?
Well, I think that's a big question because I think she's still creating that legacy. Quite frankly, she's in the role of vice president, but it's clear to me at least that she has higher political aspirations. But I think one of the things that she has been known for is to be a fighter and to be someone who is willing to go to the mat with anyone. I mean, we've seen it in Senate hearings, whether it's the Kavanaugh hearings where she was in confirmation and really challenging him about gender justice around healthcare and access to abortion. I mean, we've seen her on the campaign trail where she was, quite, I think, aptly mean for that I'm speaking, right? Because being a woman of color in these spaces that are often occupied by men, and in particular older white men, the idea that someone like her would be speaking back to them and telling them what they ought to do, I think is still an anathema to many. So I think part of her legacy will be creating a space for people to come after her. She's been a mentor on the Hill to those who've worked in her office. She's reached back to Howard University multiple times throughout this process and over her political career. I have no doubt that that will stop. So I think she will be an advocate for HBCUs more generally. But I also think, one of the areas that she has grown in, and one of the areas where I think she's sort of been resolute to do more is around criminal justice. As an attorney general, I think she recognized that the justice system, as we call it, has been anything but. And, being the top cop, if you will, of a state like California, she had a role to play in that. And I think she used the power of her office to try to do what she could to change the tide of some of that. And I don't think that will stop while she's in the executive office. I think that will probably grow. And it looks to be that she and Joe Biden will have a partnership there. So I think she will be quite influential in her own right, but also in making sure that this White House is responsive to many of these promises and many of these needs.
Definitely. I think that's a thorough and good analysis of what we can expect from Kamala. And, obviously today, beyond the swearing in, we also got to see lots of performances, including Howard's own Showtime marching band, which was pretty cool. They're going to be escorting Harris during the inauguration parade, and I'm sure they've been practicing. What do you think this means for them, and what's the significance of incorporating an HBCU into an event like this?
Well, I think it's a boon for these students. This is the kind of stuff that our kids look forward to, right? These are the kind of experience they want to have, not only with a presidential year, but when they come to our Howard University, they are on a national stage. They're in DC, and there are lots of opportunities for them to engage the system. But I do certainly think having your vice president be a member of your university community is a greater opportunity for them to showcase not just their musical talents, but many of the things that Howard University has to offer. And I will say, over this last 2 days, they featured a number of other HBCUs like Southern University in Louisiana, Mississippi Valley State. I think this is really going to become more of the conversation because oftentimes HBCUs are forgotten and they're thought of as these sort of secondary institutions when we see them as rivaling any of the other institutions that are out here. So I think this is an extraordinary honor for our students, and they've earned it and they deserve it.
Yeah, and I know many were excited to see those performances today. And, as a professor of political science, we know that former President Barack Obama made history in his groundbreaking win for Black Americans. And in many ways, obviously, Kamala Harris is breaking a glass ceiling for women, but especially women of color. What do you think this will mean for young women of color, specifically those looking to enter the realm and world of politics today?
Well, I will say, as a political scientist, as a woman of a certain age, this is the first time in my lifetime I've ever seen someone that looks like me in that office. And I imagine what that must be like. understanding what it's like about your hair and having to get up and do all of these things that many times people take for granted and don't recognize how important it is to see someone to look like you. Representation isn't everything, but it's hugely important. And I think about my nieces who now have a model of what a president could look like, what a vice president could look like. And it's not just an old white guy. So now it's not just an exception that we see, it's an expectation that our leaders will look more like us. And I think this cabinet will do that as well in ways that Kamala Harris is doing that in the Oval Office in the White House.
Definitely, and clearly you're offering us some good context right now, and we know that you also wrote for the Washington Post an op-ed where you highlighted how voters in Georgia, specifically black women, are responsible for the election of Kamala Harris, and you say she will be the most powerful vice president in history, which is a pretty bold statement. Why do you say that?
Well, I think she's right up there with Dick Cheney, and the reason I say that is because when she comes in as vice president, or now that she's vice president, there's going to be a split Senate. And so anytime that there's a tie, she gets to put her vote in to be the tiebreaker. And that's really important. We saw that Dick Cheney used that to great effect to further the agenda of President Bush. And so I think that's an important thing to note, that many times people say the vice presidency isn't important at all. But she comes in at a moment when it could be vitally important, and certainly going to be very important to President Biden and his legislative agenda. So I think the fact that she has that tie-breaking vote is of significant importance when we think about this office and what her power will be in that office.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Carter, for all of your analysis. I think an overarching theme from everything you're saying is that, Vice President Kamala Harris is not the exception. She's going to become an expectation for a lot of young people and a lot of folks. So I think we'll keep our eyes peeled for that. So thank you for your time.
Thanh you for having me. I'm saying us because I mean Howard. So
hey,
thank you for having me.
Yes, of course. Thank you, Howard. Thanks for the marching band and for the many high quality grads that you all have been producing. It's really exciting. HU.
You know.
Yes, I know that's the chant. Well, and thank you to everyone who's been tuning in. We hope you stay safe and keep following all of our Inauguration Day coverage. I'm Zincle Esamwa, and we'll be right here covering all things inauguration. See you next time.